Here with Newsbreak at 7, I'm Veeraraghav. From dramatic rescue operations to recovery of bodies of those washed away in the flash floods in Sikkim, our focus this evening not just on the magnitude of destruction in Sikkim, but also on looming threats ahead, how this disaster was one waiting to unfold, and the economic cost that the world is paying for climate change. That's our top focus this evening. Over 40 people have died and hundreds more missing after the flash floods hit the Himalayan state. The missing and dead include Indian Army personnel who were washed away from a camp in Bardang. Pictures from the riverbanks reveal the extent of the devastation. Sikkim's Chief Minister Prem Singh Tamang told NDTV that his priority was to evacuate the stranded, which includes over 3,000 tourists. They've been made to communicate with their families through army radios. Dramatic rescue efforts by the NDRF is also on at the Chungthang Dam area, the dam that burst. And there is a search on for those who may be stuck in tunnels, which apparently was what was used to commute within that dam area. The authorities in Sikkim have started evacuating residents downstream from the Shakocho Lake near Lachen in Mangan district in Sikkim. This is another glacial lake that is on the verge of a burst, prompting the authorities to issue an alert. In fact, downstream in Jalpaiguri in West Bengal, 2 people died after accidentally triggering explosives that was washed down from the Indian Army camp in Bardang. Remember, some of the bodies could have been washed away into Bangladesh, as well as the river flows into the neighboring country through the strategic Chicken's Neck. My colleague Saurabh Gupta, who spoke with Chief Minister of Sikkim, reports from Ground Zero. He joins us live right now. Saurabh, take us through some of the most important rescue missions that are possibly on in Sikkim in different parts right now. Also give us an update about that alert of another potential GLOF.
Yes, that is of course a worry, because the state really can't afford another situation like the one that caused the flash floods earlier, because we've been to Singtam today. The pictures are devastating. A building that's 4 stories high now looks like a 2-story building because 2 floors are completely under slurry debris. You cannot see. There are cars on top of each other that have been completely buried. You're walking on top of them. You realize it's a car only when you see the top of a car. That's the kind of debris, that's the kind of situation that we're talking about here. And in this context, Sikkim really is seeing, perhaps, like we've been reporting, its worst natural calamity. But the problem really here is that it's not yet over, with road connectivity cut off, especially in the higher areas, and Chungthang town being very bad shape because of what has happened there, the breach in the dam. It is a very scary situation. For example, the authorities have had to walk to Chungthang to get there. And even now, with the inclement weather in the upper reaches, doing sorties to move tourists out of Lachung is also very challenging, because even Chungtham, what we are being given to understand, that helicopter landing is going to be very difficult. But in Lachen and Lachung, where the tourists are, perhaps they can do sorties up to Mangan, till where there is road connectivity. But again, that all depends on the weather. So it's an incredibly challenging rescue operation. Even today we were at Bardang camp, where you mentioned army personnel have been washed away. And it's tragic that some of the ammunition that's been washed away has landed up in Jalpaiguri, where there's been an explosion and people have died because they tried to retrieve a box. Now the authorities have to put out an alert saying, if you find something in the river that that you don't recognize, please don't try and open it. Please inform the police authorities, and they will be disposed of in a proper manner. So that is the kind of challenge this flash flood has created for the state of Sikkim. We spoke to the Chief Minister. We went into all those areas in Singtam. It's absolutely unrecognizable what has happened to these towns. It almost seems like somebody has just, put a blanket of slurry and sludge over all these towns. And the fear is there could be more people trapped inside, and we don't even know.
Right, Saurabh, very alarming situation there. Also, just tell us quickly about the National Highway 10, which is the arterial road link. All through last evening when we were speaking, you were pointing out and others were pointing out that communications, and especially road communications, road links being cut off is the real problem. Any update on NH10? Is even partial road links to Gangtok and other places open at the moment?
See, the NH10 had also been affected at Singtam between Rangpo and Gangtok. So even Rangpo and Gangtok was taking a long time. But today they managed to clear some of the slurry just on top of the road. So the NH10 has been opened up to Rangpo from Gangtok. But beyond Gangtok, you have to take a much longer route. For smaller vehicles, you can take a route that is via Mamring, Namchi, Jorthang, Darjeeling, Siliguri. That's another extra 5 to 6 hours. Then you can also go via Lava, which road is now being advised, for usage of heavy vehicles. But again, that's another extra 6 hours. So anywhere, if you have to get to the plains from Gangtok, it is nothing short of an 8-hour journey, which is usually a 4.5 to 5 hour at best. So a 3-hour detour, it's making things extremely challenging for people to just simply even go out of Gangtok.
And reaching those who are trapped in several places, ensuring that food and supplies would I presume be an enormously daunting task in front of the authorities there, as you spoke to the Chief Minister as well, sharing those details with us. Saurabh, if you could stay with us, because we're going to discuss Sikkim and the situation and the potential consequences, but in case of any issues in the place where you are right now, or if you need to move forward, feel free to leave the conversation. There was warning, but it's not just the South Lonak Lake. Do we have an early warning system in place? What do we need to learn from another enormous tragedy? Joining us this evening, Ravi Chopra, environmental scientist, headed the Supreme Court directed experts body to investigate the hydropower related issues after the 2013 Kedarnath floods disaster. Remember, similar one there in Uttarakhand. Professor Anil Gupta, head of the Department Policy Planning, National Institute of Disaster Management. Dr. Ramya SN, Assistant Professor, School of Sustainable Futures, Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham, Kerala. Before we get into the conversation with the panelists and begin that discussion this evening, in 2013, Dr. Ramya, who's joining us on the panel, and another scientist from the Indian Institute of Science had warned that the South Lonak Glacial Lake had a high possibility of an outburst. Let's play this report for you before we take this discussion further.
In February 2013, two ISRO scientists and Dr. S.N. Ramya, a scientist associated with the Indian Institute of Science at that time, in their research paper published in Current Science Journal citing satellite data, had warned that Sikkim's South Lonak Glacier had receded by 1.9 kilometers between 1962 and 2008. Due to this, the probability of a lake outburst is very high there. In view of this danger, it is very important to install early warning systems. Scientist S.N. Ramya, who has been researching on the glaciers of Sikkim for more than a decade, also published a second research paper on South Lonak Glacier in 2019. It is said that between 2000 and 2015, the length of Lonak Lake had increased by half a kilometer and the depth has increased by an average of 50 meters.
2013 में हमारा जो स्टडी साउथ लोनाक लेक में था, उसमें हमने जो बोला था कि हमने जो स्टडी किया था सैटेलाइट डेटा लेके, जो इसका प्रोबेबिलिटी ऑफ जो ब्रेकिंग दिस लेक हो सकता है कि 42% है. देन जो पानी है जो लेक आउटबर्स्ट हुआ तो उसका पानी भी हम लोग प्रेडिक्ट किया था कि 19 मिलियन क्यूबिक मीटर तक, मीन्स अगर जो लेक आउटबर्स्ट हुआ तो उतना पानी होगा. तो उसी टाइम में भी हम लोग जैसे उसी में किया था कि ये लेक खतरे में है, तो हमने जो अर्ली वार्निंग सिस्टम भी उसी के साथ सजेस्ट किया था.
Sikkim is part of the eastern Himalayas, and in the high altitudes of the state you have no less than 300 glacial lakes. And experts say that these lakes are facing impacts of climate change and global warming, and therefore in fact a decade back the State Disaster Management Authority had started to study the lakes, and they had prepared a list of lakes which are vulnerable to climate change impact, and there were 10 lakes, out of which the South Lonak Lake, where actually the glacial lake outburst flood started, was part of that list. Now what we are hearing from sources is that there were plans of putting early alarm systems in the high altitude for possible floods, flash floods. The question is whether those early alarm systems were put in place and whether they were working or not.
These first pictures of the broken dam obtained by NDTV show how horrific this disaster was. Director General of the Meteorological Department says the glacial lake outburst will have to be monitored in the future.
क्लाइमेट चेंज जो एक ऑनगोइंग प्रोसेस है, इसकी वजह से टेम्परेचर राइज होता है, और टेम्परेचर राइज होने से जो ग्लेशियर्स है वो मेल्टिंग होता है, यानी रिट्रीट भी करते हैं, उनका एरिया कम होता रहता है। और जब ग्लेशियर्स मेल्टिंग होता है, इससे पानी निकल के आता है, और वो पानी जो हिल एरिया में जब फ्लो होता है, कहाँ कहाँ जो लेक होता है, लेक डेवलप हो जाता है, नहीं तो लेक होता है तो लेक में पानी बढ़ जाता है। इसलिए कभी भी इसका एक डेंजरस सिचुएशन डेवलप हो सकता है। इसके लिए ये सभी जो ग्लेशियर मेल्टिंग है, इसको कंटिन्यूसली मॉनिटरिंग किया जाता है, और जो लेक क्रिएट हो जाता है, इसका भी मॉनिटरिंग हो जाता है।
At present, the intensity of rain has reduced in Sikkim, and with it, the danger of a new disaster has also reduced. With Himanshu Mishra in New Delhi, Pankaj in Gangtok, Ratnadeep Chaudhary for NDTV.
Right. I will get to Dr. Ramya to understand further on the reactions that she received for that report. But first to you, Professor Anil Gupta. There was, in a sense, an early warning. Could this be construed that? B, which are the other areas that now need to be really aware of? And C, what about an early warning system across the board, or a standard operating procedure in any of these cases? Is that in practice?
See, this situation can be understood in two ways. One is that we can call it unprecedented, but on the other hand, we can also consider that a lot of early warnings in the form of earlier events have already existed. And the devastation has two angles. One is that the implications of climate change and the glacial the formation of glacial lake and the burst of lake. But on the other hand, the kind of the basically degradation in our geo-ecological system has taken place,
Right.
and that has made our landscape much vulnerable. So I think any kind of major damaging event is an outcome of the combination of two.
Okay.
So this is my thinking that only one part cannot be blamed. So like it should not be considered only as a result of the climatic actor. There are a lot of non-climatic actors that also work on that.
Yeah,
And 2013 Uttarakhand flood and the Chamoli incident, there are several the small and large incidents. So a large number of signals are already there. And basically, what is important that how do we strengthen localization of the preparedness? Like there are a lot of the policies and plannings already exist, but how do we strengthen? Many times we are talking about the Doppler weather radars. That is certainly one important issue, but we should also agree that a warning of a very, very little time in a hilly terrain, to what extent it can really help evacuate the people. So we should be realistic and accept that the hilly terrain has additional challenge, and we should prepare according to that. So
Okay.
basically,
So you're saying there is planning,
a local level.
there are
strategies,
procedures, but it needs to be
Yes.
implemented. I just want to quickly get Ravi Chopra in as well. Sir, you've studied this extensively. Was this something waiting to happen?
Yes, I'm quite certain that as Dr. Ramya has warned us in her paper, we know that these kinds of events are going to happen. Scientific literature tells us that as the glaciers are receding, they are also fragmenting, breaking up into parts. And in the process of fragmentation, they are forming these glacial lakes. The number of lakes is increasing and their size is increasing as the glaciers melt. So several lessons emerge from this particular disaster. The Indian Himalayan region glaciers have not been that extensively studied, though I would say that in Sikkim, the studies are more extensive than in the other states. So there is an urgent need to set up this Institute of Glaciology that the governments have been talking about since 2013. That's number one. Number two, our dams have to be designed, particularly these dams that are in the glacial river valleys, they have to be designed to absorb the glacial lake outburst flood along with their normal water. Now, in this particular case, I am guessing that the Indian summer monsoon season is over, so the dam already had a lot of water in it, and then came this huge amount of water from the lake outburst. The third, example is that the early warning systems, as the other colleagues have pointed out, they are absolutely essential. And it's high time we quit beating about the bush and putting them into place. The fourth point is a very critical one. The expert body which I headed in 2013 had said that no dams should be built in the paraglacial valleys. Now, these are valleys where glaciers have receded in the recent geological past. They leave behind enormous amounts of debris and sediments. When there is a flood in these valleys, then that sediment along with the water comes crashing down huge, very steep slopes and therefore requires a lot of energy. When that strikes any obstruction in its path, it will just smash that obstruction, as we saw in 2021 in the Chamoli disaster. The fifth issue is that we've got to do much better proactive disaster management planning. We leave it to the developers, the dam builders, and they just do a perfunctory job.
Okay.
The last point I want to make is that we know that human habitations have to be redesigned, relocated in the glacial valleys. That is the only way by which we will be able to reduce the vulnerability and deadly impacts of these floods.
Right. Important points that you made there, sir. And as Professor Anil Gupta pointed out, Dr. Ramya, this is categorically a consequence of climate change, something that was waiting to happen, A, and B, there is now an alert about another glacial lake as well in that same region in Sikkim. What can you tell us about that as well?
Yeah, as Sir Anil sir said, like I'm also agree with him that, like, it is not because of lack of early warning system. It is like, as a scientist, like as a remote sensing expert, I would like to point out one more thing is the data accessibility. So as you said that one more lake is about to, like, warning conditions. So we are not accessible to the, we are not accessible, or the data of on free access is constrained for Indian scientists, like remote sensing data, because each and every time visiting these lakes and glaciers, it's very challenging. So we rely on like satellite data. So these are this I should add on to his points, because he has added a very good points, and like I wanted to add this point as one of the main point, because now also we are actually studying the post stage of the South Lonak Lake, how it happened. So in some area the Nepal earthquake also the trigger for this, and some of the other scientists are telling that the CloudBurst, and the other one is telling us the avalanche can actually trigger this outburst of this lake. So like better we get
No, please go ahead.
So better we are accessible to the data, like the other countries are accessible to free request data.
You're
so
saying
then
real
we would
time.
be able to
availability of information in terms of data and studies, the more we have data, the better will be our ability to predict any of these events. That's the point that you're making. I know that's an important one as a lesson in terms of creating an early warning system. I'd like to understand the global procedures as well. But first, while there is no price one can put to human lives lost, what's the economic cost we are paying for climate change? The Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure has released a report that estimates that the average infrastructure loss is about $850 billion US, or 14% of the world's GDP growth is at risk. It also emphasizes how low and middle income countries are at a higher risk. It's come out with a unique global infrastructure risk model and resilience index to both quantify and provoke action. The model estimates that a $9.2 trillion US would be needed in terms of infrastructure investment to make it resilient. Professor Anil, what do you this is a huge investment that needs to be made. Do you think there is a categorical step forward in terms of understanding the seriousness of this, or are we going to keep seeing tragedies after tragedies like this unfold, disasters after disasters unfold before we learn a lesson?
No, I agree that there are serious efforts, but the efforts are not sufficient. We need to pace up. We need to increase the speed, and also we need to improve the precision as well. And basically the precision has to be towards the localization of the efforts. For example, I'm a witness of this report that you referred to. Just 2 days back, it has been released, and so that indicates, because the design of our development and the highways, not only this incident, the damage to our infrastructure and highways a few months back in the states of Himachal and other places, if we see, that indicates time and again that the infrastructure has to be designed and built resilient. And basically that has to be brought at local level. So how to enable and inculcate a culture of the resilient infrastructure at local level and enable the capacity to that level. That is in fact important. Because we have good examples in India, but we also have the examples where we consider that there has been a lot of the gaps and we need to improve. Particularly the mountain areas, the data has been a challenge. The speakers, other speaker also reflected to. But in the recent times, there is a lot of improvement. But when we already know that such kind of risks are not unprecedented, such kind of risks are very much possible, how to enhance the science-based planning interventions at local level. And I think that's very, very important point. And we have to be very fast in this.
All right.
In enabling the climate resilient infrastructure at local level.
Do it swiftly and do it properly is what you're saying. My quick question to you, Ravi Chopra, when you share, a lot of this has been out there in public domain as information. When you share this, do you believe that there is just an apathy across the board in society and in the system in general, which is resulting in a blockage to having moved forward and take this seriously?
There is an apathy, but I would say that the apathy in the governments and their agencies is much greater because they have more information. The people don't know as much as the government does. It has a lot of data information. Now, if I were sitting there, I would be really planning the entire human settlement in that valley. I mean, we have to be proactive. We have to take into if the people weren't there, the amount of damage would be much less. Human loss of life would be less. And if the infrastructure was not there. So I think we need to do very serious disaster planning, in disaster management planning in these areas.
That's an important point that you're making there. Dr. Ramya, when you first shared your report in 2013, and I literally have just 30 seconds left on the show, when you shared your report, what was the reaction? Did people take it seriously, or did they just dismiss it as another study, which we will wait and see what happens?
No, I would like to say that, after our paper published, the government has taken an action. They have already installed an early warning system there.
Okay.
So that I would like to point it out one more point.
Okay. You're saying that
Veera,
there was
I
some...
must insist.
Yes,
Veera,
please go ahead.
insist Look, we have the example of Joshimath. Tons of studies have been done. The studies were not released until the High Court ordered the studies to be released. We know that Joshimath is sitting in a very critical situation. What is being done? कितने महीने आपको और चाहिए?
Right. You're saying that there are enough and more examples and enough and more disasters that we've seen for us to have already created systems that are in place to perhaps give early warning. We'll keep our focus on that. Of course, at the moment, though, the focus on the rescue operations and the unraveling of the disaster that's coming to us as information from several parts of Sikkim. We'll keep a close watch on that as well. That's all we have time for on the show. The news continues here on NDTV.